Welcome to my desk, a highly optimized workspace except for the fact that my phone stand and mouse are damaging the desk. And listen to this awful sound. I need a mouse pad. So I bought this nice gaming mouse pad and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to inlay it into the desk so that there's no edge, everything can just be one smooth surface. Completely unrelated to the fact that I came up with an inlay tool that I wanted to show a practical use for. Now in my last video about this, some people noticed that the demonstration piece I did have some gaps around the edge, and that's because I had a little bit too much extra tolerance built in so that I didn't have too tight of a fit. So I corrected that by just printing another one of these inserts with the outer diameter of the larger section a little bit larger. And to make things complicated, I decided that I wanted brass banding, 32nd inch brass banding all the way around the edge of the mouse pad. So I brought this piece of 1/32 inch thick brass that I'm gluing between two pieces of wood to make the cuts for that banding around the mouse pad. So I decided that it was probably high time I cleaned out my table saw so that I didn't have little pieces of hot metal landing in a bed of kindling. I really don't think this is necessary most of the time. It just kind of builds up until it forms a slope and gets sucked in by the dust collector, but if it's going to cause a fire, that's a different story. And I went ahead and purchased a metal cutting blade that has a tooth angle and profile that's optimized for cutting non-ferrous metals. And I made my cuts, it worked fine, but even this blade and with the metal sandwiched between two pieces of wood, it was just flinging sharp little bits of brass on me. So I stopped cutting as soon as I believed I had enough material to go all the way around the mouse pad.
That totally sucked. I'll never do that unless I absolutely have to.
But it did work and gave me a nice finish on the cut brass. So I free up the brass strips and bend them around a piece of 1/2 inch pipe and just kind of fiddle with it until I have the right profile to match up with the mouse pad. Now I screw the template material down to a backer board and double stick the mouse pad onto the template material. And then set the leveling feet on the sled. And then I cut the template using the smaller diameter section of the insert. Now since I have 32nd inch banding all the way around, I switch from a 1/4 inch bit to a 5/16 inch bit and cut the inlay with the larger diameter section of the bushing. And I lost the footage of making the cuts, but I did test out the template, cutting a recess into scrap material, and everything fit really well. So I can haul the desk down and do it for real. And since the dry fit worked out well, I can do it with glue. Not too bad. Now, my wife was highly skeptical about me doing this project, but it ended up looking a lot better than she thought it would. I think it looks really cool. I like the functionality of having just a level surface, but also having high quality mouse pad material to be doing my mousing on. So I think this is an enhancement to my workspace where I spend more of my time during the course of a day, probably anywhere other than bed. So any improvement is worth the effort. So in my last video, when I talked about this insert that I made to do this inlaying, I said that one of the main advantages of this over the inlay bit sets that are meant to start with a template and cut both the recess and the inlay piece is that this uses a 1/4 inch bit, and that's better for cutting a large template. Now, since that video, I found that Whiteside actually does make an inlay bit set that works with a 1/4 inch. So this is actually very close to the ideal tool set to do this process, starting with something to inlay, cutting a template, and then cutting the recess for the inlay piece. So this is what you get with this set. You get this sort of knurled sleeve that threads into this housing. I guess I'm not exactly sure what this is for. This, I can understand, screws into a router base plate, I guess. And then this has a sleeve that can be taken off. So the way I'm doing this process, you would cut the template with this piece against what you're trying to inlay, and then you would put this back on and cut with this against the inside of the template to cut the recess. And then it's got this alignment pin, so you can chuck this in your router and make sure everything's centered before each use. And then it comes with a 1/4 inch bit. So this set is not far from what you'd ideally want the product to be, considering this process of starting with something to inlay. Instead of this, what you'd want is something that threads onto here with a flange that has some screw holes in it so that you can put it in a sled like this one, because having the leveling feet is really helpful. If you're starting with something to inlay, I think a sled's a lot better than just the router base. And then to do the banding that I did, instead of switching out bits, you could have different sizes of these pop-on rings. Like a smaller one, for example, would allow you to have that area for some kind of a banding if you want to do something like I did with a mouse pad. So I'm not going to make any effort to try to develop a product, but I think if you're clever, You could figure something out with this existing set. You know, those changes to make it ideal are fairly minor, and if you're clever, you can work out how to get this mounted in a sled and figure out something for a banding if indeed that's something you want to do. It's kind of a fringe case. Most of the time you're just trying to inlay something. I just made it overly complicated for the purposes of making the video a little bit more interesting. And I added this set to my Amazon store, so you can check that out in the description. That's all I got for today. See you next time.